and welcome to The Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast and your fortnightly home for Doctor Who news and reviews. I am Matthew Toffolo. Joining me from the other side of the planet is my good friend Billy Garrett-John. How are you doing, Billy?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thank you very much, Pickaxe Week, for having us and doing this with us. It is nice to be acknowledged.
Yes, it's nice to be back because we did Pickaxe Week last time, so it's good to be back. Lots of great podcasts to listen to this week, including Gamey Game, so give them a listen. But for now, we're talking about Doctor Who. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you're in the right place. If you don't know what Doctor Who is or where to start, or maybe you're just like a person who's interested, but you're like, oh, this has been going on for 60 years. Where the hell do we begin with a show that big? Well, have no fear, because that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about where to start with Doctor Who. And we're also going to talk about the recent Doctor Who poll results, where they've gone through every Doctor and looked at all their stories, and the readers of Doctor Who magazine have voted for their favourites. So we're going to have a little discussion about that as well. But first up, news. What's been happening
we don't
in
just
the world?
talk about old shit Doctor Who. We talk about what's going on with new shit Doctor Who. So we're going to talk about... We're going to just do a quick run through all the news. I mean, the first one is news that isn't news, is it? Miriam Margolyes, Professor Sprout herself, although, the Harry Potter feelings aside, has been confirmed.
Say, not the reference to go for there.
I don't know what else she's done. I honestly don't know her from anything
Blackadder.
Other than... Oh, yeah, Blackadder. Yeah, but how many people watching this are going to know she was in Blackadder?
Well, if you don't, I mean, come on, you're watching a Doctor Who podcast. You must know Blackadder.
You're a sado. You follow all the Yogscast stuff. You're into all that weird shit. Has been confirmed to play the Meep in the 60th anniversary series. Have we had some kind of erasure of Beep in there? People are
this
saying,
is weird. Yeah, where's Beep gone? So this all came about because Miriam confirmed it in her book, and I guess the BBC didn't proofread it. But
everybody knew that was like one of the earliest things that we knew about the specials was Miriam Margolyes playing Beep the Meep.
Yeah, so I mean, unless maybe this was just a Russell thing and he knew a book was coming out and he was just like, oh, I'll let you do it, darling, and we'll just go from there. Cool, great to finally have her in Doctor Who. She's going to be a Who, I'm sure, and in such an interesting role as well. She was born to play Beep the Meep. RTD, talking of DWM and Russell T Davies, he's referenced Twitter talk about Jodie Whittaker's era being erased in a very tongue-in-cheek piece for Doctor Who magazine. Now, it's hard enough watching Doctor Who out here. Forget trying to get Doctor Who magazine in New Zealand. Tell me, Matt, what has he said and why are so many people on Twitter upset? So he basically did a little piece where he was like, I get to watch the first completely finished edit of one of the new Doctor Who episodes. He said, but I'm going to have to turn off my producer brain and switch on my fan brain to watch it. And he basically did a note-by-note thing of what a fan would be saying or thinking whilst they're watching this episode of Doctor Who. And it was all random stuff like, this bit of music, is that a new theme? Is that what it sounds like? When's the season 10 soundtrack coming out? Murray Gold, and it was just like some mad ADHD ride of Doctor Who lunacy. And obviously it was all very tongue-in-cheek. It was very Russell, but people got funny. People were like, how dare he take the piss? It was like, well...
So he mentioned...
Don't make it so easy to take the piss out of you, then.
Well, yeah, I know. Maybe don't take it so seriously. How did the Jodie Whittaker stuff appear in the piece? Like, what was that about?
It was... I think he had... So I think he talked about it. He sort of was like, Jodie Whittaker erasure, but how can we be erasing her? Because there's her police box, it's still here. We haven't got rid of the prop, it's lovely and blah, blah. And I think that was it. But obviously that was enough for people to go like, oh, right. So he knows what people are saying on Twitter and stuff.
Right. Okay.
But just people getting their knickers in a twist over nothing.
I bet Russell is very grateful to some extent that a platform like Twitter exists now so that people can put their unfiltered opinions about the show that he makes into the world, because then he basically gets to monitor everybody's expectations, how everybody is sort of feeling about the program. Not that it actually matters in the grand scheme of things, because, you know, what the fans think of the TV show doesn't really matter at all. But it's going to be interesting to see how or if any of that filters into the program. Like, we may not start getting references to stuff, but you know how Stephen Moffat liked to be very meta with his commentaries in shows, even like Sherlock, the references to Sherlock or Moriarty being shipped. And Chris Chibnall didn't really lean into that, mainly because, you know, nothing came out from the filming, so it was impossible to actually, you know, speculate on anything online. But it will be interesting to see how or if Russell approaches like that side of fandom, because that is a new development, I suppose, in the show.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some like little tongue-in-cheek jokes about things. But I think that would be the extent of it.
The season 20 sets have arrived. The collection, if you don't know, Doctor Who get these beautifully rendered box sets where they upscale classic episodes of Doctor Who from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they pack them full of value-added material, I think is the industry term, but we would know it as bonus features. And it's all sorts of stuff, mad shit that popped up. You know, Peter Davison appearing on some kids' TV show for a 5-minute interview. They'll wham that in there. And then they'll go off and they'll shoot, you know, cool, extra, nicely produced documentaries and features with the cast now, reflecting on it all. So the reaction to that has been positive.
Yeah, I think so. It's the biggest set yet, I think. It's just masses of stuff.
Is it 8 discs or 9 discs or something?
Something like that. It's insane. Mad. It's absolutely bonkers. But I mean, I guess this is the good thing about when you get into this sort of period of Doctor Who, is that so much of the stuff still exists and so much of the archive stuff still exists. You know, and if you want to sit through, you know, 8 hours of watching Peter Davison film, I don't know, Terminus, you can do it because it's all there.
I love watching those studio outtakes. I cannot wait to watch all the stuff from the 5 Doctors.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I have seen that the new edition of the 5 Doctors has been going down quite well, and people like the visual effects, and the Dolby Atmos soundtrack sounds really nice. So that was one of the things I was really looking forward to. I love the 5 Doctors, as we mentioned a couple of episodes ago, so you can go back and, you know, have a listen to it's a promotional tool. Listen to our podcast. Go and listen to old episodes. It's good.
Go and listen to us talking about the 5 Doctors.
Absolutely. You went to Bournemouth Comic Con.
I did.
Tell us all about that.
It was good fun. I met Colin Baker for the umpteenth time and Sylvester McCoy for the second time and John Levine for the first time. I walked past Mandip Gill a couple of times.
And smelt her.
Yeah. Otherwise, it was good. It was good fun. We had a good laugh. My brother got to meet Sylvester McCoy, dressed as Sylvester McCoy, and Sylvester McCoy was dressed as the 7th Doctor as well. So it was just really, really good fun. It was very small though. There was all there to do. Yeah, it was a Showmasters event. It was this. So they had 2 things running at the same time. Obviously the Comic Con, and then they had some like Lego convention running in like the hall next door. But it was a big venue, but there was just nothing there. There was like barely any stalls. You literally walked in and it was just like a few tables with the guests on it, a little area with a stage, and then there was maybe like 10 tables of tat. And, you know, some of it really was just tat as well. There was not, you know, I thought I was going to be going there and be like, oh, you know, might pick up a Target novel or, you know, an annual or something just to mark the occasion. Didn't need to worry about that. I didn't spend any money. It was brilliant.
Well, you know, there were people like selling fucking
scented candles and shit. I was like, come on. Most of the people here don't even know how to use normal soap, let alone scented candles.
It's sad, but it's true. I remember going to Telford Comic Con before it became Wales Comic Con in England. Oh, yeah. I don't know what the fuck that's about.
It's really weird. I don't like
that. And Telford's an odd place. It just seems to have a shopping centre. And then got off the train, walk towards Telford Convention Centre, which is like a really nicely kitted out venue, but why the fuck it's in Telford, I've got no idea. And you could actually, like in cartoons where you have the scent thing coming from the pie and the little character gets carried off his feet towards it. You could do that, but it was for BO. That's the only way I could find my way to the venue. It was amazing, but I'm glad you had a nice time. I'm sorry you didn't get to spend money.
No, but there were some lovely people there who came up to me and said, listen to the podcast. Nice chat with James, who we met at Pandorica last year. He came over and said, hello.
Hello,
he said,
James.
He said, I listen only on Spotify or on, the audio version. So nice to see you again, James, if you're listening. And he said he gets all of his news from us. So I said we need to do more to make sure that our news is up to date.
Well, okay, it's not like we're recording this. We are recording this on the day it's going out. We're here live. Yeah, right. Well, okay, let's talk about some news that has occurred, roughly speaking. Chris Chibnall has done an interview for a podcast called Who Corner to Corner, I believe. And I listened to it on a wet commute back through Auckland. And maybe it was the weather that sort of tinted my expectations of it all or how I felt coming out of it. But I came out of it wanting to know more, which is good because there's a part 2 coming out.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting hearing him chat about how he viewed the show, making the show, the production, the way that he interacted with marketing people. And he seemed reluctant to clue anybody in on what was going on, which I think is fair to say that's something we've kind of been aware of or that has been, rumoured. But he was sort of, did you listen to the whole thing in the end?
I haven't, no. I just sort of looked at the cliff notes on Twitter.
Yeah. He was basically sort of saying... Cheers, Sarahs. He was basically saying about, the secrecy in the show, you've got to be sure who you can trust, because I always think for a show like The Bear, which I think is going out on Disney Plus at the moment and is apparently very good, you don't want to know what happens in a show like that. You want to be surprised when you watch it in the moment. So why would you tell anybody about anything that's coming up? And it's like, that was a very, very truncated way of how he put it.
Yeah.
But it's like, but Doctor Who isn't an ITV, a one-off ITV drama that might get recommissioned for a second series. It is a massive monolithic show, and you have to have the right head on you to promote the program. And from listening to that interview, I'm, as a showrunner, as a head writer, maybe as a head writer, Chris Chibnall, grand. I really enjoyed the Chibnall Whittaker era. I know a lot of people didn't, but I did. But I don't think. Did they have a brand manager? Like, I guess he's not that kind of showrunner, is he?
No, and I was just about to say that. This is it. It isn't a show, like you said. It's not like a drama. This is a brand. Like it, love it or not. That is just how it is these days. And I mean, it was getting like that in the 80s. John Nathan Turner, he knew that there was more to be done. And it was just that the BBC couldn't see it for what it could potentially become. So it seems weird that then you'd have someone who literally grew up with Doctor Who at the time when it wasn't being treated well, and then would be like, oh, well, I'm not going to really treat it to its full potential. I mean, we're kind of lucky in some ways that we got stuff like, we got all those different games, didn't we? We got the VR game that then became the PlayStation game, and there was that Weeping Angel mobile one.
There was the interactive stuff. Like, to be fair, in terms of Doctor Who being a world you could enter into, I think that era is going to be known for really branching out into the interactivity side, like video games or the escape rooms or the immersive theatre experiences and stuff like that. And, that VR stuff was happening right from Jodie's first series, that runaway experience thing.
Yeah, there was that as well, wasn't there? Yeah.
It really, on the one hand, maybe the audience wasn't there to get these kind of books out and stuff like that people wanted to interact with, but actually maybe because it's special, we could do a video game. Maybe because it's special, we could do a theatre experience, but you can't afford the lease on a fucking, museum, but we can do these things. So it was effective in that way. But I think on screen, in terms of the promotion, in terms of the public being aware of what was going on and what the fans knew, we don't need to know everything, but I think probably it's fair to know a bit more than we did.
Yes.
At the time.
And I mean, it shows really in his first series, at the end of the Woman Who Fell to Earth, rather than doing a trailer for the series, here is a trailer of all the guest actors.
Bonkers.
All right, some people are going to care about that, but the kids aren't going to give a shit because
I tell you who doesn't care about that. The fans who want to see what's coming up later, because we know all these people are going to be in it. We know Lee Mack is in this episode. We know Mark Addy is in this episode, whatever it is. That seemed to me to be, I can't remember who said it on Twitter, but, and obviously he talks a lot about his time making Broadchurch. And he's got this showrunner course and a lot of people are going on to work on ITV dramas and stuff. But it was like Doctor Who was produced like an ITV drama. Yeah. To the extent where they, don't front load it. But the trailer for the whole series, as you said, was here are the guest stars we've got in. And that's the only reason you'd watch an ITV drama is, oh, look, Mr. Bean is Prowo, whatever it is. It's the only reason you'd watch one of them. Oh, here's Sheridan Smith in another dowdy, depressing, slice of life drama. So, I don't know. It was interesting, but you're right. I think he didn't have that head on him to run it as a brand. Beyond that, some interesting stuff that came out of it. There was going to be a Pating sequel called Patings.
That would have been great.
That didn't happen.
I've been all there for that. That sounds good.
It's because you don't like the Saranga conundrum, but you like the Pating.
I think the Pating has got great potential. So I think, if you'd have done a story with, it'd have been like Star Trek, Trouble with Tribbles, but Patings, or Gremlins, isn't it? It's just going to be Gremlins with these little bastards.
That would have cemented them more, I think, as like a all-time great villain. Not all-time great villain, but in terms of design and in terms of, you could bring them back. They could be in group shots of villains, and be recognizable. Like they needed another story to cement that.
Yeah, it would have been good fun. I imagine it'd have been sort of fairly farcical, but it would have been been a good laugh. And that's what you need sometimes.
It wasn't always the plan for Mandip Gill to be a companion through the whole of Jodie's run. So interesting how that obviously sort of developed, I guess, over time. Yeah, with their chemistry on screen. It Takes You Away was placed earlier in series 11, which I thought was particularly interesting because for me, It Takes You Away is the finale of that series. Like I know that obviously Tim Shaw comes back in the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, which is the finale, quote unquote, that didn't feel like a finale. But in terms of the thematic beats of that season, for me, the arc is Ryan and Graham and their relationship and how that develops. It's not quite as dynamic and exciting as Torchwood or Bad Wolf, but that was, I think, the strongest core running storyline through that season.
And it makes sense that you'd put that story at the end because if you have it early on, then it's like, well, the character development, there's no development. It's just and also straight away.
Grace appearing in that story. Spoilers. It's like, well, she was only in it 2 or 3 weeks ago, or whenever it was placed. So that to me, it was odd. And also, so like in my head canon, it, you could reorganize most of the running order of Series 11. I think it would make it a better viewing experience. And I think It Takes You Away, while not finale fodder, if you knew that the next week you were going into the New Year's resolution special with the Dalek, I think that would have been a fine, pre-season finale. Anyway, he can see how stuff like the Merca happens. This is Chib saying, monsters just not coming off. I think this was in relation to, again, from It Takes You Away, the villain from that being cut. Which I can't remember its name, but it was some sort of...
the foreskin creature.
The foreskin creature. He gave it a name in the podcast, and I can't remember what it was.
Spindle or something?
The Spindle Man or something. Yeah. Which looked cool.
Foreskin snow.
He got cut, and it looked cool, but, interesting that he says there are things that are just out of your control that you just think, okay, that's going to look fine on the day. And then you get into the studio and it just doesn't work. And you try and make it work in the edit and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. So
it looks all right in the pictures.
Yeah, it may have been seeing it in motion or the way they shot it or something, you know?
Maybe.
It's like the self-loathing creature from Red Dwarf. Like, it looks great as a still, but I can see why when they got it in the studio, they were like, we just have to film its fucking cast. Yeah. And
so did
shadows.
You know that was originally the design of the Destroyer in Battlefield?
From Doctor Who. Yeah.
I was like, what the frig? That's so
I'm
so
glad
good.
that they swapped, you know?
Yes.
I'm glad the Destroyer looks the way he does. They wanted fully CGI Sea Devils for the Legend of the Sea Devil story.
Thank God that never happened.
Thank God it didn't happen. That was also supposed to be just a straight pirate story. No Sea Devils involved until it seems like the kind of last minute.
What the fuck would the plot have been?
And described it as being like the Grand National, that story. You get round a corner and there was another hurdle. And I think of a lot of Doctor Who stories where you think, okay, I can see the production of this hasn't gone very well. That screams there's been trouble. Because the edit is all over the place. And I didn't fully appreciate that until you and Johnny talked about it for the podcast review last Easter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I watched it in a fucked up thing anyway. We mentioned earlier for new viewers, I live in New Zealand. So last year, I watched my first ever Doctor Who story in New Zealand, and it was Legend of the Sea Devils, which is edited in the most incomprehensible fashion. But then to add on top of that, somebody who has watched Doctor Who as it should be watched without advert breaks on the BBC for my whole life, to then watch an international edit and they chisel fucking adverts into it where ad breaks don't exist. Yeah. It was even harder to keep a track on what was going on. And now working on that side of things, I can see how much material sometimes gets cut that is actually quite important to set the next scene up. You know, it's not just a case of fade down and fade back up within half a millisecond.
Oh, I was going to say, does this mean you might get to watch Doctor Who early for New Zealand broadcast? But it's all on Disney Plus. You missed out. You might have been able to have watched the Legend of the Sea Devils early.
Well,
had you
I don't know if
moved last year.
I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want that on me, you know. But I mentioned, because I got a thing sent around to my email like, oh, here's pick 3 questions out of these 10 to introduce yourself to the team. And I wrote one about Doctor Who, obviously, because you have to have the token Doctor Who fan in the office. And I said, gutted, kind of gutted. I'm not going to be able to caption any of it, but looking forward to seeing what happens on Disney Plus in the future. Because I don't think they knew. I don't think they knew that they weren't going to get Doctor Who back.
Oh, really?
On TVNZ. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
This is a very niche chat about
nobody told us.
Nobody told us, man. Okay, so next, The Sun reports Ryan Gosling has been approached about a guest role in the show.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. This all stems from Ncuti Gatwa apparently saying on the set of Barbie when Ncuti was cast as Doctor Who, Ryan Gosling was like, "Oh my god, man, that's like my favourite show," which I can imagine him saying dressed up as Ken.
Yeah, he'd already announced his love for Doctor Who because he cast Matt Smith, didn't he, in a film that he directed?
In a terrible film that didn't come out, or Matt got cut from, or some mad shit?
No, I think he was in it. I just think it came out with very little fanfare and no one saw it. That was the one that he shaved his head for, I think.
Yeah, he played like some hard man in it.
Yeah. Yeah, can you remember the trailer for that? He was like, he had a shaved head and was he sort of like...
Was he wearing like a vest or something? He was he looked quite swole.
Sort of like topless, but not topless. And I got like, he was sort of, wasn't he dancing around like that? Or am I getting it confused with Morbius? I don't know. Either way. Oh God,
I haven't seen Morbius yet.
I've not seen Morbius yet and I never will. Not unless my life hits rock bottom. And
I reckon we should watch it because it has got Matt Smith in it.
Oh Christ! Come on, no.
That's a commentary for the Patreon. If you don't know, we have a Patreon. We do commentaries for Doctor Who things. We talk about other Doctor Who things. It's worth it. And maybe Morbius will come up.
Maybe we'll do that. Yeah, so he was already a fan. That's why he cast Matt Smith, because he'd saw Matt Smith in Doctor Who and was like, wow, this is a great show and he's a great guy. So he's got previous as a Doctor Who fan.
Interesting.
Whether or not he's going to be in Doctor Who, no, I doubt it. But hey, I'm all up for being wrong.
I'm all up for being wrong. Did we know about? I'm trying to think about high-profile stars that came in. Did we know about Kylie before it was officially announced? I know Kylie's not quite on the same level as Ryan Gosling, but
No, but I guess back in 2008 or 7, whenever it was, she probably was. She was still producing music with regularity then, wasn't she?
True. And she was still doing stuff like X Factor and Britain's Got Talent and all that sort of stuff.
I guess she was doing that.
Or was that Danny?
No, that was Danny.
Oh dear. Poor Minogues.
Yeah. The Manoogs. I don't know. I'd be happy for Ryan Gosling to turn up.
Yeah,
but I don't think that'll happen.
I think they should do it. They should treat big stars like him the way that they're treated in the Star Wars films, like Daniel Craig being in The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
and just stick him in a fucking stormtrooper outfit. And but then I love that scene because I always watch it and I can't watch it and not go, "That's Daniel Craig. That's Daniel Craig. That's Daniel Craig." Because they used his voice, and he sounds like fucking Daniel Craig as a stormtrooper. But all the other ones, like Prince Harry, wasn't Prince Harry or Prince William in it as a stormtrooper, and like Simon Pegg and all the kind of major big celebs that were in the area at the time basically came in and said,
Tom Hardy did one.
Tom Hardy,
and he got cut.
Ah, poor Tom Hardy.
Because I think he slapped Finn's, is his name Finn? John Boyega. He slapped his ass or something in the scene.
Okay.
And it was meant to be like, military camaraderie sort of stuff. But maybe they just thought this is a bit weird.
Maybe Disney were like, because we know what Disney thinks about
we know what Disney can be like,
interesting. Okay. Who Spy is back, Matthew?
Yeah. So good.
Tell people what Who Spy is.
So back in the old days of 2004, when internet was dial-up, and Doctor Who didn't exist anymore, but it was coming back, they did this thing on the website called Who Spy, and Who Spy was just little teasers from behind the scenes, little pictures of the set or the clapperboard or just silhouettes of people, and you'd be like, oh, what does it mean? What is this? What is this? And they've done it again. They're bringing it back for the new series, and it's great. They've already shown us David Tennant with the clapperboard. We've had some weird text on a thing on a set, and some other set, which was like a drawing board with lots of notes on it and stuff. What does it all mean? Who knows? We can only guess.
I'm trying to think. At the time that Who Spy was a deal when it first came about, did it end up showing anything that ended up having future sort of crazy significance? Like, I can't believe they showed us a photo of that, and obviously we just didn't know the context of it at the time.
I remember, the big one I remember was the Auton guns. Hands.
And
I remember thinking, holy shit, the Autons are back? What? This is like
crazy.
Proper Doctor Who. So that was a good one. And I think we might have seen bits of the TARDIS, didn't we? Maybe like segments of the console or bits of the wall
is there a photo of like bits that ended up going onto the console like before they've been fitted on or something? Like the globes and stuff, like all that weird shit. Okay. I mean, Who Spy? It's going to be so interesting now looking at it, and because we're so close to the 60th anniversary happening. By the time, do we have an air date yet? I don't know. But it's going to be really interesting to look back at those posts now and think, wow, we had no idea the significance of what that was,
Yeah. Or no significance at all.
or it's just like some fucking random prop. But you can imagine that Russell would be like, we've posted something and it's like the most important thing in the history of Doctor Who, and you guys don't know what it is yet, and I'm not going to tell you which thing it is. It was hidden in a Who Spy. They'll do some shit like that.
Oh, so, for sure.
Shout out to the BBC Studios team for, fucking bringing it back, like, you mad bastards. I don't know if we talked about this. I feel like we may have talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Davina McCall being cast in the Christmas special. Have we spoken about this?
We talked about that. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We can ignore that. Doctor Who Redacted, the drama podcast, is coming back on the 18th of September, has already come back on the 18th of September, which is cool. What did you think of the first series, Matt? Because I haven't heard it yet.
I think it started well, and then it ended up just going a bit too sort of techno-babbly Doctor Who. It ended up like some Big Finish Doctor Who stories where it's like, oh, all this stuff's happening and we have to do the flim flam with the flong blob and flibbly blob, and then that's it, it's all sorted. And then you're like, okay, I guess. It was annoying because I quite liked the idea. It was presented as like, this is a podcast of people in the world of Doctor Who, and they're going to be talking about things that happened in the world of Doctor Who, like the Yeti invasion or, all the big stuff, but from an in-universe perspective. And I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah. But then it became very much just a drama. I was like, oh, okay. So I felt like they could have maybe had the drama within the podcast setting. I think it would have been very interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool idea.
If they'd have just done it, it's like, right, we are never going to leave the sound booth of this podcast. But the story will happen there. Because you could have done stuff like there's like weird alien invasion coming through the sound system or something, and maybe their transmissions are doing. There was so much they could have done with it, and then it just became a general drama. And I sort of, I sort of did dip out a bit because my brain was just like, okay, and I wasn't all that interested in the characters. But I don't know if I'll bother listening to the new version.
I'll give it a go because I think that I love that idea. I love the idea of Doctor Who existing, but in a very specific format, in a very specific realm. Like the way that the Monty Python team used to play around with LP records back in the day where, the grooves were designed as such that if you put the needle down on the record, it would play a sketch you hadn't heard. Or it would play it out of order.
Oh, cool.
You'd be trying to tell people like, oh, you've got to listen to this one. It's really funny. And they put the needle down and it's totally different. They hadn't heard that one a week ago.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So like when Doctor Who gets to something like playing with a convention like that, or like when Big Finish first started, the audio dramas, the sound of something could kill you. That's like, I love it when Doctor Who does stuff like that. But you can imagine like an American podcast, like a murder mystery sort of thing. Someone going, and then a blue box appeared in front of me and my life changed forever. And then,
that's what I thought it was going to be like.
Yeah, that's such a good idea.
But don't know. It was a shame. So
never mind.
Yeah.
But hopefully the second series is good. And then this saga is and has been developing for people who are new to the Doctor Who fandom, because that's what we're going to get onto in just a second, is how to get yourself into Doctor Who. One of the things that we probably need to let you know about ahead of time is that some of the people in the fandom are bonkers.
This is going. Yeah.
Some of the people in the fandom, case in point, us two. But we want to draw your attention to a particular individual by the name of Ian Levine, who is currently charging £100 a pop to access and fund his animated reconstruction of the missing story, The Massacre. Ian has done animated reconstructions before, was tangentially involved in the program back in the 1980s. And what more can we say about that? I mean,
he may
tell
or
people
may
what's
not
been
have
going on.
Stopped missing episodes getting burnt or something.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean that is up for debate, isn't it now?
There are some questions about whether or not that was indeed the case.
If that actually happened. He did also, what we can't take away from him is the fact that he hired Hans Zimmer, arguably one of the greatest composers for film at the moment, to play the keyboards on arguably the worst charity album ever made, Doctor in Distress. If you've not listened to it, go onto YouTube, search for Doctor in Distress. It's a terrible charity album from the 80s, all about Doctor Who. And it's shit. And Hans Zimmer's playing the keyboards. So, you've got to start somewhere.
You've got to start right at the bottom.
Right at the bottom, yeah.
But it's, so this whole missing episode reconstruction thing, Ian's done a couple of them in the past. all for like private consumption. People have popped around his and watched them on his big telly in the past. But he's done these animated reconstructions before. They've been for some sort of, people pop round and watch them at his gaff. But there is now a conversation being had about the level of funding somebody could put into this before, and then it becoming not a fan project anymore,
Yeah.
And, Josh Snares, who we've had on the podcast, absolute legend, does their own missing or Big Finish animated stories, but it's presented online with no audio, so you have to go out and buy a copy of the audio to watch it alongside. And that is the way you do it. Not this, Ian. Not this.
No. It's weird. And there's obviously been a lot of controversy because it looks as if they've taken stills from previous well-known recreations of these missing adventures and just sort of stenciled over them, rotoscoped over those screen grabs. And in some cases, there's also some consideration that AI might have been used on some of the stills as well to make it just look like it's a cartoon when they've just taken a publicity photo. So it's all a bit weird and all a bit dodgy. But Ian Levine has been massively entertaining on Twitter with the way that he has reacted to people offering genuine criticisms, on Gallifrey Base, which is a big Doctor Who forum, which I no longer frequent because it's pretty shitty.
It's a hive of scum and villainy.
It really is. And I looked at, because people were sharing it on Twitter, some of the things that people were saying, and they were like, well, why does it need to be this much money? And, and who is animating this?
Just
you're
questions,
saying that you're saying that it's being animated by professionals. Well, what's the production company? So we can see where the money's going to, and, all very genuine. But he reacted in the typical Ian Levine way. No, those are too personal of questions, and how dare you? You're being rude and this, that, and the other, and you won't be happy until I've had another stroke and I've died, and
I demand a public apology.
Yeah, I mean, he's like Boss Nass, isn't he, from Star Wars? Fucking crazy. I mean, you met the man, so. What do you think?
I have to say, he was a very hospitable bloke to a degree.
Yeah.
And set us up with some really good interviews. One in particular, which we wouldn't have been able to get otherwise.
No.
And I found him perfectly affable. He wasn't easy to converse with, but also, he didn't know me from Adam. So, whatever. So I
bit awkward that he told you to do the interview with your trousers off, though.
I mean, at least there were people in the room who were also enjoying it. It was an interesting experience, and I think he's somebody I've warmed to. I think after speaking to, he obviously he's got a thing that people just don't get with his approach to the way he thinks he should be perceived by Doctor Who fans. The easiest way of putting it for people who don't know who he is he is like the embodiment in real life of comic book guy from The Simpsons. But somebody who feels like they have an ownership and a right to being spoken to in a certain way when they don't reciprocate in kind. That is, I think, an approximation of his character from an outside perspective. But I have to say, he's a perfectly, he's fine. He's a decent bloke.
So long as you don't talk about Doctor Who.
So long as you don't talk about the thing he is known for. He's got all of his high energy records, which were popular in clubs in the 1980s for however long. And then he's got his Doctor Who missing episode reconstructions.
Yeah.
Anyway, where to start with Doctor Who, Matthew? This is the central crux of today's podcast. We are going to be trying to introduce the not we to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we should start off by saying where we started. I started with my dad being a fan back in the day. And then I watched Doctor Who Night 1999 with him, which was a whole evening of, programs surrounding Doctor Who, about Doctor Who. And I fell in love with it. Bang, there we go. Overnight, I'm a Doctor Who fan. And it hasn't changed since. And my family did a really, really, some would say good job, some would say bad job of making me a Doctor Who fan. Because, I don't think that's something that you can get done for when, with social services. But it probably should be something they look into at some point, is indoctrinating children into sci-fi franchises. But yeah, that was my story, Matt. How did you get into it? It was your brother, wasn't it?
It was my brother, yeah. So obviously we both grew up, we both got into Doctor Who during the Wilderness years. The Wilderness years, which is the period of Doctor Who where it wasn't on the television because it was off air for 16 years. And I was born in 92. He'd grown up at the tail end of Doctor Who before it got cancelled in 89. He'd watched all of Sylvester McCoy's time as the Doctor. And I was born in 92 and just born into a house where Doctor Who was always on the telly. Doctor Who toys were around, Doctor Who books were around. I couldn't move for Doctor Who, and there was no escaping it. While my dad tried to get me into Catholicism, my brother more successfully got me into Doctor Who.
They are two very similar churches to a degree.
Yeah, a lot of dressing up and funny hats.
A lot of believing in nonsense. A lot of missing material. Some scandal.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was me, really. So we're 90s boys, aren't we?
90s boys. So it's kind of difficult for us to, I think, objectively, recommend Doctor Who, because we grew up at a point where we already knew a lot about the show before it came back, and maybe that coloured our opinion of it at the time. We've obviously gone through, our own sort of journey with rediscovering and reappreciating that era of Doctor Who, being 2005 to now. And when we asked online where people should start, I have to say I'm incredibly disappointed by the number of completely wrong shit answers that we received from people. So we've always said, if you're interested in getting into Doctor Who, for the love of God, go nowhere near the classic series until you're ready. Because not only is that a huge, chunk of the program's history that is very difficult to penetrate, just generally from a lore perspective. If you're not used to watching 1960s, 1970s, 1980s television productions, serialized dramas, as well. British television especially, it is impenetrable for some people, and it will put you off because, whether it's the pace, whether it's the music, whether it's the sets, whether it's some of the performances, because, it's a bit more theatrical, it's staged a bit more like a play. A lot of those stories, especially in the 1960s and the early 1960s, were performed from beginning to end like a play, with live camera cuts in the studio, with very minimal special effects and any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's no good going into it thinking, oh, well, I like old Star Trek, so I'll probably like old Doctor Who. Even old Star Trek, it feels like a world away from the Doctor Who that was going out at the same time.
Absolutely.
So because I sort of mentioned to my brother that we were going to be doing this today, and he was like, oh yeah, well, I'd probably start with the John Pertwee or Tom Baker years. I was like, maybe if you're already into old telly, possibly. Yeah. But if you're not, as obviously,
and you're not into Doctor Who,
that might not be the best place. And he was like, well, it works for us. I was like, yeah, but we were weird. We're not children of the 21st century. I think really, I always say the best place to start is with the new series, and start with Christopher Eccleston as it came back in 2005 with the very first episode, Rose, because it just introduces all the concepts in just the best possible way, really.
I think that, you're approaching this show in a modern TV perspective where sometimes shows come with a caveat that, okay, you had to watch all of the previous week's stories to get it. Yeah. Right. I don't think that's always the case for Doctor Who, but I can understand there are certain circumstances where that is the case. If there is a series-long arc where okay, it maybe would be more satisfying if you'd watched the previous 4 stories to get all the clues or to get the little references. But really, Doctor Who was always created around the idea, or maybe it wasn't always created from the beginning like this, but it has always slipped into this thing of you could tune in any week and get a completely different story from what you had the week before. I think that is much more palatable for an audience now, with the fact that you only have 45 minutes and then you're off somewhere else the next week. Whereas if you're watching some classic stories and you are saddled with the story for 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. And they are short episodes, but again, if you're not used to the pace of old television, it can be really difficult to, maintain your sanity. I struggle. I struggle with any Doctor Who story that is, any longer than 4 parts, and usually from the 60s, I struggle with. They are not my go-to stories to watch, and they shouldn't be the first story that you watch. So we saw a lot of people saying, we've got one here. Somebody saying we'd be starting with An Unearthly Child. That is the very first Doctor Who story of all time. For historical reasons, probably would be interesting to go back and watch it, but make sure you're a Doctor Who fan first, I think.
I think that's very much it. Interesting to watch when you're a fan, which is how I saw it. I can remember being so excited getting to watch the first episode because I had no real idea of what it was like. And that's a 4-part serial or story. And the first part is great, really good. A lot of mystery. It sets everything up. It's weird, wonderful 60s telly.
Yeah.
The next 3 episodes, oh boy, is just grunting and grumbling from cavemen for 3 25-minute episodes. That is hard going. I can remember the disappointment was quite palpable when I watched it. I was like, oh my God, what is this? To the point where some might say how it managed to survive beyond those first 4 weeks is quite something. But then they introduced the Daleks, and
there you go, exactly.
That saved it. But
I believe if I consult the Great Review of Death schedule planner, I believe later this year, as we approach the 60th anniversary, we're going to be doing An Unearthly Child. So,
well, I mean, it makes sense.
It does make sense. So for you Doctor Who fans who are going to become, non-Doctor Who fans who are going to become huge fans entirely through listening to this podcast, and take our advice, and you hold off on watching An Unearthly Child for a couple of months after binging Doctor Who on your streaming service of choice, illegal or illegal, let us know what you think when we come round to it eventually later in the year. I've got some other suggestions here. So as we said, yes, I mean, I think Rose, undoubtedly, that is where you start. Series 1, Episode 1, 2005, Christopher Eccleston. But what's quite nice is that obviously with the format of Doctor Who being the lead actor changes every, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
It does mean there are a couple of other jumping on points.
Yeah.
Which people have recommended too. One here, of course, Series 5, Episode 1, The 11th Hour. Matt Smith's first story is The 11th Doctor.
Yeah,
I think
that works.
If you want to watch something that is not quite 2005 in terms of production, budget, visual effects, all that sort of stuff, then that is a really good way of starting. I will put this up for debate. Say whatever you want to say about it, Matt, but I will suggest The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Series 11, Episode 1.
Oh yeah,
just because it's a decent regeneration story, and also it's the most recent regeneration story that you can watch with a brand new Doctor.
Oh, very much so. Because I was thinking this, I was like, well, you could sort of say the pilot with Capaldi, but there's too much in that series that harks back to other stuff. But Series 11, love it or hate it, at least it does start with a complete new slate and a breath of fresh air. So that would be a possible in for fans.
I've got some suggestions here from Twitter. So Factory Employee, what a name, says, I started...
I might have to bleep that.
Okay, well, that was bleeped, but that's fine. I started with 9 and haven't watched anything previous. I'm in love with it and I'm seeing it through to the end. So that's somebody who has already started their journey in Doctor Who. This sounds fucking religious when I say it like this. Selling it to you as a bloody, way of life.
Join the cult.
It's like, join the cult. That's somebody who is currently on their journey through Doctor Who, and they started with Eccleston, and they're going to be going back to the classic series at some point. Don't rush into it. Enjoy the show.
Yeah.
Yoda, this is their screen name on Twitter, so I'm going to read it like this. Start on the new Doctor, I suggest. If that is good for you.
What was that good? That was good. That was really good. I couldn't have done it better myself. So do they mean start with Ncuti Gatwa?
I would imagine
Christmas?
so.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's probably a good place to start because the 60th anniversary is probably going to hark back a fair amount. It's going to be paying a lot of tribute to the show from 2005 onwards. So, kind of recent past. Yeah. But I also think because it's the 60th anniversary, there's going to be a lot of other things that are coming into the mix. Some stuff like alternative media, which we won't touch on here, but, comic books, audio dramas, novels, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of Doctor Who, not just on television, that is also really worth looking at, but we're starting off with the TV series here.
Yeah.
LL Cliff J says, Death to the Daleks, a bridge to BBC VHS, same place I started. Well, I have to agree, good. Death to the Daleks is a banger, but probably not a great place to start your journey. Reese says, I'd probably start from the pilot. So we were just talking about this one, Series 10, Episode 1. Series 10 introduces audiences to all the important stuff and gives them the option to go back later and rewatch the rest.
Yeah.
Would you suggest the pilot over Deep Breath?
Yeah, because Deep Breath's crap.
Yeah. Deep Breath is Peter Capaldi's first story. That's Series 8, Episode 1.
Yeah.
His character goes through quite a dramatic shift in tone.
Yeah.
It's so weird talking about Doctor Who to somebody who doesn't understand what Doctor Who is.
I know, it's
when
weird.
You put it into context like this. He goes through quite a dramatic shift in tone. So, the pilot is the most palatable version of his character. And as Matt said, his actual debut story isn't as strong as this very, very soft reboot for the series. I mean, the fact that it's even called the pilot is an indication of what they're going for there.
Yeah, it's a very, tongue-in-cheek way of approaching it. Yeah, I think with Deep Breath as well, it's too long, and I think too much at the beginning. He's not even in it, and it's just waffly wank going on with other characters that has really no place anywhere else in the story. It just feels like it's just filling time for the sake of filling time. But yeah, I mean, I think the pilot isn't necessarily a bad shout.
Yeah. Waffly wank, doot, doot. David Mitchell says, timey-wimey, start where you start and find your way there. Though you'll be taking the long way home, it's about time travel after all. And like I said, I think that's not a bad way. David Mitchell, not the David Mitchell.
I thought you were going to say it like this.
Start where you start and find your way there. I think that is a very good way of approaching it. I had never really considered. I mean, but then also you think of the way that we would have started watching classic Who.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for a TV listing in, the local TV listing magazine to see what was going to be on UK Gold that weekend or whatever, which you may have already had some prior knowledge of, thinking, oh, it's the Sea Devils this weekend. I haven't seen that one before or whatever.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be good. I know what they look like. But to take it from, go on BBC iPlayer or your streaming service of choice, wherever you are internationally, and just look at the episode synopsis, and provided you're not at the thick or the thin end of a season, pick a middle episode somewhere there, anything that takes your fancy. I mean, like Blink. Blink is not an introductory story. The Doctor is not really in it, but it's a really good introduction to the way that Doctor Who plays with horror convention and the kinds of villains you can get in the show that are kind of genre and time bending and stuff like that. What other kind of middle of the season random, bits of gold are there?
I mean, I was going to say, in terms of Blink, it worked with my other half. She watched Blink with no knowledge of what Doctor Who was. It freaked her out. She thought it was great. Then she went off and watched all of the new series from Christopher Eccleston onwards. And then she was like, right, this is great. And then went back to the 60s and was mad and went all the way through it.
That is where she lives now. Like, although she is a fan of Doctor Who as a whole, she is a 1980s Fifth Doctor stan. That is her era.
Yeah.
And so, similar to my other half, although she doesn't give a shit about Doctor Who, she couldn't care less about Doctor Who in the 60-year sense of it, right?
Yeah.
She tolerates it. She likes the books. She likes the artwork. She likes going, oh, that looks cute. What's that monster? That's as far as it goes. And we will watch Doctor Who together, but only the modern stuff. She can't, I can't remember the last time we watched anything classic where we sat down and she actually watched the whole thing. But anyway, she got into it through Jodie Whittaker. Yeah. And she really liked Jodie Whittaker's tenure on the show. She liked that whole series. She would catch up on episodes that we weren't able to watch together. She would watch it in her own time. Now that is an indicator of somebody who's actually enjoying whatever they're being forced through watching. So she started with that. So that is...
What hostage situation did you put her in for that?
I've only ever had to when have I ever had to be like, right, we have to sit down and watch? It would have been for the podcast when we were living back in Bristol. And it probably would have been something like, oh God, it would have been an 80s story.
Yeah.
It would have been something I wouldn't have minded so much that she was going to sit there and watch. It might have been a Sylve or something.
Yeah.
God, bless her heart. Oh no, maybe it was a Davison. Right. Although, if we have to suggest any classic stories for people to dip into if they enjoyed the new series, where would you suggest people start with the classic series, Matt?
I think Spearhead from Space is a really good one because that is a very good jumping on point because that in itself is a bit like a soft reboot for the show.
Yeah,
it's
season 7, episode 1.
It's John Pertwee's first story. It's the first story in colour as well. So if black and white sort of puts you off a bit, this is a really good one. And it was all shot on film, so it looks stunning.
Amazing, especially in HD. If you can find a nice... I don't know where it streams, where you can watch it in HD. BritBox?
I guess on BritBox, yeah. I mean, it's the nicest looking old episode of Doctor Who for that reason. So that's a really good one. I guess, anything with like early Tom Baker stories, because they are very much, like you were saying, they're very much secluded, really, unless it's in his first season. But, Pyramids of Mars is my favourite Doctor Who story. I think you can stick that on and get a real sense of what this show is trying to do. Yeah. Or maybe something like Remembrance of the Daleks, which is That
was the one that I wrote down. Yeah. I think whenever I've had friends captive and thought, right, let's watch an old Doctor Who, that is the one that I always go to.
And they go for the doors. They're the door handle's rattling, and you're like, I've bolted it.
And they turn around and they see me with a key like that, going like that.
Yeah.
Dropping it in my mouth. You're
going to have to wait for me to shit this out onto the carpet.
No, we're not having chicken wings tonight, so you're not going to see that for a while. I mean, Remembrance was the one that I wrote down because I think it is... I think some people have described it as sort of like the closest you'll get to like a Michael Bay directing Doctor Who back in the classic series, because it is, Megan Fox turns up and takes a bra off. No, it's like, explosions and it's like explosions left, right and center. Yeah. Daleks being blown to bits. It's cool. It's a cool story.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. You get, a big returning villain. I won't spoil it, but you get a big returning villain and you get some, one of the best actors, to play the Doctor, who really at the time wasn't given his flowers. And now you get to go back and watch Sylvester McCoy as Doctor Who and go, he's really good.
Yeah.
So forget what anybody's told you about, it went rubbish towards the end of the 80s. It did. And then it got really good. And then it finished right at the end.
Yeah.
What about black and white episodes to start people on? Obviously, we mentioned An Unearthly Child.
I think something like Tomb of the Cybermen is very good because it introduces it sort of introduces a new companion and it's got an old monster. It comes up with this. One of the big conventions of the 60s is the Base Under Siege story, where you basically have a load of people trapped somewhere and the monsters are outside trying to get in. And so it's very much like that. So it will introduce you to that convention. It features my favorite monsters, these buggers over my shoulder, the Cybermen.
Yeah.
Even Earthshock. Earthshock is another good one to watch.
Earthshock would definitely be good to watch.
That is what this Cyber Leader is from.
Yeah, the best Cyberman story ever, I think. Earthshock is just amazing.
It's very good.
I suppose in terms of those excellent. I suppose in terms of those big stories from the classic series that might be worth looking at if you're like, right, okay, which are the big stories to tune in for? Earthshock is definitely one of them. That's from the Fifth Doctor's era. Genesis of the Daleks. We were talking about the Fourth Doctor earlier. That is a 6-part story, which they can be difficult to get through. I struggle with them, but it's probably Doctor Who's best ever 6-part story.
Yeah.
It zooms by for me.
We reviewed it a few weeks back.
Very recently.
And we just sang its praises all the way through.
Yeah. The 5 Doctors as well, something else we spoke about recently. That is the 20th anniversary story. So if you've sampled a bit from each Doctor and you fancy seeing them come together for the original Avengers team up, that is the one. All the Doctors, minus one who had passed away and they recast him. And
minus another who couldn't be asked to turn up.
Minus another one who, to the press call for the story, sent his Madame Tussauds waxwork. Yeah. So it's just sometimes when you're explaining Doctor Who and what a mad show it is, when you just boil it down to the explanations like that, you think, what a fucking weird TV show this is. And what a weird bunch of people who are in it as well.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
Great stuff. So next up is something that might help you a little bit on your journey, but really this is for Doctor Who fans who want to vent and get frustrated about stories they like not being given their flowers. So Doctor Who magazine have conducted a 60th anniversary poll in which at the moment all we know are the rankings for each individual Doctor. There is going to be a full list of every single story ever published in one big ranking. But at the moment, they have just done it for individual Doctors. So we're going to go through those. And then, of course, because that's what the Review of Death was founded on, is us moaning about shit like this, we're going to go through the full list when it gets published towards the end of this year.
Yeah.
But on this stream, we thought we would discuss these. Now, Matt, remind me, it was all done online and it was out of 10. These stories were rated, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they gave you every episode for each Doctor. They did 2 Doctors a month, and you had to, out of 10, rate each story. This might be helpful for people who, if you're looking for what are considered the best Doctor Who stories as voted by fans. This might help you if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll try an old Doctor. Let's see what this is like. We'll comment on them because some of them we might be like, that's impenetrable, like the War Games, which is a superb story, but it's 10 episodes long. It's all in black and white. If you've never watched black and white telly before, you might die. We'll start off with the main man, the gaffer himself, William Billy Hartnell himself.
Indeed.
So top stories.
Let's do the top 3, and should we do the top 3 and the bottom 3? We'll comment on those.
I think so.
And then any ones we see in the middle that we're like, why is that so low? We can just bring up really quickly.
Yeah. So a story we actually reviewed earlier this year came in at number 1, which I was surprised at. I gotta say, the Dalek Invasion of Earth.
It is a great story. It is better than the Daleks' first story.
Yeah.
In fact, looking a little bit further down this list, I can see that the Daleks, the original Dalek story in which they're introduced, the second ever episode of Doctor Who, comes in 5th, which I suppose is only there for posterity, the fact it's the first ever Dalek story, because it is a slog, that first Dalek story, and is told much better in Technicolor with Peter Cushing as Doctor Who for the Doctor Who movies, which again, if you're not that keen on watching these TV versions, those adaptations might be a nice way to start with an introduction to the Daleks, because both Dalek Invasion of Earth and the Daleks are 6-parters. So again, might be a bit difficult to crack into if you're not used to watching that. So in first place, Dalek Invasion of Earth. I have to say, it's not my favourite First Doctor story, but I can understand it being number 1.
Yeah, I agree. I'm quite surprised that it's number one, to be honest. But I guess, like you said, it's a Dalek story. It's probably the best surviving Dalek story from his era. Dalek Master Plan came in at number 3. This is a story that only exists in parts because a lot of old 60s Doctor Who was junked by the BBC. Why did they do that? Well, why do Disney Plus remove stuff from their streaming service without telling anyone so you can't watch it ever again? Times haven't changed. It's crazy, but there we go.
Unlike what the Doctor Who team or the BBC did at the time, they didn't fucking delete the file and then burn the hard drive around the back in a fucking skip, which is what they did back then. So these stories are gone. Visually, a lot of these stories are missing. There are animated reconstructions. We have the audio for every single story. And sometimes people, very clever people, very lucky,
because some shows from the 1960s and even the 70s don't even have that. So we're very lucky that we can actually listen to this stuff.
Which is a massive thanks to everybody who ever held a microphone up to a tiny little speaker in front of a TV.
Or jury rigged their tape recorder into the back of their telly, risking fatal electric shocks.
They did it for us. But yeah, a lot of these stories don't exist. But as we said, the top 2 do. So Dalek Invasion of Earth, number 1. As you said, Dalek's Master Plan is 3rd. But in 2nd place, The Time Meddler, which, correct me if I'm wrong, has always been at the top of those polls for the First Doctor.
So last time in 2014, it was number 5. So it's always been in the top 5. In 2009, it was number 8. So it was much further down the list. And then in 1998, it was number 12.
Wow.
So it has gone up in the world. Yeah. I mean, it is my favorite William Hartnell story, I think. Mm-hmm. That and the Aztecs are 2 of my favorite William Hartnell stories. But I think Time Meddler wins just a little bit more. It's notable because it is the first time the Doctor who is a Time Lord, if you didn't know, meets another of his own race who also has a TARDIS. So you can only imagine that for audiences back in 1964 or whenever that aired, they were like, what the friggin' hell is going on here? There's another one. Holy shit. So
minds are being blown.
Yeah, and it's a pure historical otherwise. Which was the case for a lot of old Doctor Who, was that stories wouldn't have any monsters in or any sort of real sci-fi elements. It would just be they go back in time, they get caught up in historical events, and they've got to get themselves out of it.
So the bottom 3 are the Sensorites at number 27, the Space Museum at number 28, and in last place, the Webb Planet.
I mean, I don't agree with the Sensorites being that low.
No.
I like the Sensorites. It's 7 episodes. It is a bit of a slog. It does go on for a bit, but I actually do rather enjoy it. I think is a good concept. It's a bit too long. Web Planet is shit. Rewatched it earlier in the year because it came out on Blu-ray as part of the season 2 box set. My God, that is like having teeth pulled. It really is. Or
I would rather go to the dentist, actually, and I'm terrified of the dentist.
Yeah, well, there we go. I went to the dentist the other day. I've got a new dentist, and he was lovely. There's a man called Bjorn.
Oh, yeah.
He's from Germany. Yeah. He is literally up the road from where I live. Very nice man. Yeah. I said that we have a Doctor Who podcast, and he was like, oh, yeah. He said, there's some very good actors in Doctor Who, yeah? I said, yeah. I said, who's your favorite? He's never seen it. Who's your favorite? Tom Baker. Oh, yeah, Tom Baker. Yeah, yes.
Oh, yeah, with the big hat and the long scarf,
and the scarf, yeah. He had a poster of The Simpsons. You know, that famous poster of The Simpsons, which is all the characters?
Oh,
that was stuck on the ceiling above the chair, you know, to amuse the kiddies. It amused me.
To distract them as they were having the strongest part of their body pulled out of their face.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sat there going, "Oh yeah, that's that guy from that episode." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I've seen that one." Yeah, so good fun. Anyway,
and what did you have done, Matt? Why don't you just tell us the whole hog?
Oh, I mean, it was just because I joined the surgery, so it was just a general sort of checkup. They did put some like super glue shit on 2 of my teeth at the back, because he said, there's a little bit of decay there, and there's a split, so you might want a bit of sealant on it. That will be £20 per tooth, so that's 2 teeth, that's £40. I was like, right, okay, fine, I'll have that done if it saves my teeth.
This is the kind of shit we talk about. So as you said, Web Planet, yes, I agree, that being so far down the bottom.
And if you want to have your own Doctor Who experience at the dentist, I suggest watching The Gunfighters, where Doctor Who goes back in time to get his root canal sorted out.
Now, that is what I wanted to start with. In terms of our discussion of stories, why is that so low? 21, The Gunfighters. That is a brilliant episode of Doctor Who.
It's great. It's great. I don't know why it's that low. It's good fun. It's good fun.
Very disappointing. Around that as well, number 22, The Savages. I'm very shocked to see that low because I feel like that is starting to have a bit of a renaissance in terms of people going back and going 4-part William Hartnell is fucking decent. You know what I mean? It's.
I mean, this is a missing episode, so I reckon if it existed, I think it would be much, much higher. Yeah. It's just one of those unfortunate things that because it's sort of fairly inaccessible at the moment. I mean, if it gets animated or something, I would love to see what the polls look like when we do it in 10 years' time.
Also on this list that I'm a bit shocked by, 17, The Edge of Destruction, which out of the first 3 episodes of Doctor Who, I think is the best out of those first 3. It's only 2 episodes long. Oh my God, I love The Edge of Destruction.
It is good. It's wacky.
It's wacky, it's bonkers, and there is one of my favourite ever scenes in the show is right at the end where William Hartnell is on his own in the console room and he's talking about the Big Bang and the formation of the universe and all that sort of stuff. I think is just one of the coolest bits of 60s Doctor Who.
He does it so well as well.
He does it so well. It's probably one of his best bits of acting in the show. It's quite cerebral. It goes to some pretty strange places, but if you want a Doctor Who story from that period in time that takes a bit of a sideways glance at sci-fi and maybe isn't all just aliens and back in time, that is definitely a good one to go for, I think.
Yeah. And like you said, it's short. It's 2 episodes, very easy to digest. I think otherwise, I think it seems pretty fair.
Yeah.
Looking at the list.
What would you have as number 1? What's your favourite William Hartnell story?
Well, I said it would have been the Time Meddler. Yeah, and I think that was the one that I voted the highest. There's not really anything on here that. I mean, I love the fact that the Galaxy 4 has gone down compared to previous years after it was animated because everyone watched it was like, this is crap.
It is shit. It is shit. I love the Aztecs. That's my favourite William Hartnell story.
Yes, and I'm glad that's in the top 5. Yeah.
In the top 5 is really cool. Okay, so let's have a look at the second Doctor. So this is an interesting one because, I mean, obviously there are fewer stories. And when you look at it listed like this, you think, God, he had such a small run. But they were, hugely important stories in the pantheon of Doctor Who. I think this is where Doctor Who goes from being, a Saturday night show to fill a gap in the schedule. And although arguably it did hit some pretty bumpy times with ratings and sort of public opinion around this time, I think this is where the show comes into its own and finds its stride as a sci-fi series. So the top 3, The War Games, which is the final story for Patrick Troughton as the Doctor. That's 10 parts. As Matt said, probably best to steer clear of that for a little while.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a fantastic story because it does a very good job of keeping the story flowing over 10 weeks, which seems like an impossible task, but somehow Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dicks, the writers, pull it off. And it's great. Yeah. And it introduces the Doctor's people, the Time Lords, it's a bit of a monumental story just in terms of the lore of the program. It sets up a lot of stuff.
Big time.
So I think is it number 1 for me?
No, I wouldn't say no.
No, but it's certainly up there. But I wouldn't say it was number 1. Then at number 2 we have the story that I would have put at possibly number 1, Tomb of the Cybermen, which I mentioned earlier. Brilliant. It's just an all-round classic. It was missing for years. It came back in 1992 when I was a wee bab. And it's great. It was one of the first black and white Doctor Who stories I watched, and I bloody loved it when I was, in nappies. So, yeah.
I think people who were fans of the show before us, who only heard the audio for this story prior to the visuals arriving, they appear to have that taint their expectations or their opinions of this story, because I think I've certainly heard from older fans that the visuals were a letdown compared to the audio.
Yeah.
But I don't see that at all. I think that, especially when you look at the film sequences and some of the model work, it is so well paced for a story from that time.
Yeah.
It's got so much atmosphere for a story where the characters, the main villains, the Cybermen, tend not to get very atmospheric stories.
Yeah.
Earthshock does, but it feels doom-laden. It doesn't feel sort of like it's got loads of, like the mise en scène in this story is so cool. Like you're in an underground, frozen hive full of Cybermen, and it feels like it. It's great. It's really well realized for the time.
Yeah.
And I would have put that number one as well. Third, The Power of the Daleks, which is Patrick Troughton's introductory story.
Yeah.
A great episode, but it's, I think because it's missing and it's so seminal, I think it's difficult to give a full opinion on it in terms of going back and watching it. It's a great reconstruction. If you want to get into the animated reconstructions, that is a good place to start of the recent ones.
I mean, I think, again, like you said, it's very difficult to say because we can't actually watch it as it went out. It is probably at the top of my favorite Dalek stories because I remember when I first listened to it, I just thought, wow, this is great. And I like the animated reconstruction as well. So I'm sort of okay seeing it up there. I think it deserves to be rated highly. And then what about the latter three stories? Are you sort of happy with that? Do you think those have ranked well?
The bottom three, 19th, The Underwater Menace, 20th, The Dominators, and The Space Pirates comes in dead last. I would personally say, I think The Crotons is a worse story than The Dominators. I think The Dominators is... The Dominators visually has more going for it, I think. The Crotons, I can't get past their Brummie accents.
Yes. That is weird. That is a weird choice.
It's a really odd decision. But they're supposed to be South African, I think. But they sound Brummie. So I don't quite understand what's going on there.
Just Roy Skelton just couldn't do that accent.
I mean, he's good at shouting.
Yeah.
Of the stories listed there, I'm surprised the Wheel in Space is that low.
Really? I don't really rate The Wheel in Space.
I've always really liked it. I think that it's better. I think it's better than the Highlanders. I wouldn't say it's necessarily better than the Ice Warriors, but then, there are some of these stories in the middle I've never been a massive fan of, like the Macra Terror, I think is all right. The Faceless ones, I think, is definitely just okay. So it probably deserves its place there. But I'd put The Wheel in Space above the Faceless ones, maybe because it's got the Cybermen, and I think some of those sequences with the Cybermen infiltrating the Wheel are really good.
Yeah, that is true.
And there are some really nice visual moments, like with the egg with the Cyberman in it and the Cybermats.
Yeah.
And I think the design for the Cybermen in that story and the way they speak is really cool and creepy.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised it's as low as that, but it hasn't been reconstructed, and I think it's one of the ones that's really crying out for it.
I'm sure it is probably one that will get done. It feels conspicuous by his absence at the moment as the only Cyberman story not to have a home media release in any capacity. So I'm sure it'll come out eventually. And like you said, that in itself might boost it up the ranks because people can actually watch it for what it is.
Exactly. Right, let's have a look at the third and fourth Doctors. So, 4, John Pertwee is the third Doctor, my favourite Doctor. Top 3, Inferno, The Green Death, and Spearhead from Space. No notes, Matthew. No notes at all.
No, I mean, Inferno is fantastic. Inferno is the story that famously made me shit my pants as a child. Not actually, but came close.
I was going to say I've never heard that version of it.
Yeah, so I mean, it is fantastic. It's the first time Doctor Who does parallel worlds and alternate realities. So well worth a watch. And yeah, bloody scary as well. The Green Death.
And of course, they all turned around and they all had their eye patches on, of course.
Of course, they certainly did.
There's a little deep cut reference. You'll get it eventually, Doctor Who fans. You'll get it, newbies.
Yeah.
In 15 years' time, maybe you'll understand that reference.
And then we've got the Green Death, the one with the maggots, which if you're new to Doctor Who, but maybe you've got a relative or a parent that liked Doctor Who as a kid, maybe in the 70s, maybe if you turn around to them and say, did you ever see the one with the maggots? 9 times out of 10, they'll probably go, yes, it friggin' terrified me. It was great. For some reason, it's just one of those stories that just seeped into the consciousness of the public. Yeah. Brilliant story. It marks a big shift in the program at that time. Because a lot of characters are written out of it, and just it's really bloody good. It's good fun. And then of course, Spearhead from Space, we mentioned it earlier as a possible jumping on point for Doctor Who. It's fantastic. Doctor Who goes into colour. We've got some great monsters with the Autons, and introduces the unit family as a full-time fixture of the program. The John Pertwee era is an interesting one for Doctor Who, because it's unlike the rest of Doctor Who, because a lot of it is set on Earth in the present day, or the then present day, I should say. And it features the army blowing shit up, and Doctor Who helps the army blow shit up, which is always cool. And, as a little boy, that was great. I loved seeing Cybermen and Daleks getting the shit blown out of them. So, yeah.
It's a very warm, nostalgic era for me. For exactly the same reasons. These were the stories that were repeated ad nauseum on, old classic TV channels in the UK when we were growing up.
So stories
like the Sea Devils, for good reason. Yeah. Stories like the Sea Devils, the Mutants, I've got very fond memories of watching back then. Yeah. Speaking of, the Mutants starts our bottom 3 in 22nd place, the Mutants, which is a surprise for me.
Yeah, because I rewatched it the other day and I really enjoy that story. I like it.
It's a good story. It's got an interesting political sort of nucleus to it. Yeah. 23rd place, The Monster of Peladon, which I would probably agree with.
Yeah, it's dog shit.
That low down the list. And The Time Monster in 24th.
Yeah, that is deservedly so. I know some people like it for its sort of camp madness, but it is a bit nonsensical, in my opinion.
We'll do it at some point and I'll be able to understand what the fuck's going on. But
I think it just tries to do too much, and it just doesn't really get a grasp on what any of these concepts really are, or what they mean. I think what is worth saying with this one, because there are so many stories on here where you look at them and think, well, that should be higher, but then you see another one, it's like, oh, but then that should be higher. This era has some of the best Doctor Who stories ever. I mean, John Pertwee has got a very strong run of stories, so it is very hard to place them, because you've just got really good bangers facing off against each other, and it's just very hard to rank them.
Really, that top 10 could, as long as you've got kind of Inferno and probably the Green Death up there, any of those 10 could be in the top 5.
That is very true. That is very true. Yeah.
And then we move on to the most popular Doctor of the classic series. He is the David Tennant of his day.
My favourite.
My Doctor. Think of Jesus.
Think of Jesus,
the fourth
Tom Baker.
Doctor, Tom Baker. Top 3, City of Death, Genesis of the Daleks, and in third, your favourite, Matt, The Pyramids of Mars. Again, I have no notes.
No, all very, very good stories, all brilliant. Interesting, really, that City of Death came top, because that is a very different tone to the other two stories. The other two stories have that very doom-laden tone, like you were talking about with stories like Earthshock. And it feels like, oh, shit's going to go down in this story, or, the stakes are high. Whereas City of Death is more of a fun run-around romp. But it's just very well written. It was written by Douglas Adams, who, if you're not a Doctor Who fan, you've probably heard of him because he wrote a little thing called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He worked on Doctor Who for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And he wrote this banger of a story. So, very good. I'm off to Paris at the end of October.
You are.
I will be visiting all the locations, running around with a scarf on. Annie's mum has already said, I'll film you and you can run around the streets of Paris together.
Perfect. Bottom 3 for this listing. Meglos 39.
That should not be that
Horns
low.
of Naimon. No?
Meglos should not be that low. Meglos is fine.
No?
I like Meglos.
Yeah, it is. I have to say, as we were saying just there about the John Pertwee era, whereas any of those top 10 could be in the top 5.
Yeah.
I think once you get past number 11, The Brain of Morbius, I think all of those stories below, with the exception of 1 or 2, like I really like Robot, the Sontaran Experiment, Nightmare of Eden. There's some stories down here that I really like, but I have to say the rest of them, from 10 downwards, 11 downwards, I wouldn't give more than a 5 out of 10. And I think that is tricky for the Fourth Doctor's era. It went on for 7 years. Yeah. And there is a point that you hit where I just feel it is treading water for a long time. Douglas Adams comes in, spices up the dialogue a bit, but you're still, we're still talking about stories like, the fucking Armageddon Factor and the Power of Kroll that he's involved with,
Armageddon Factor, Christ, Armageddon wouldn't be as bad as having to sit through that 6 weeks.
Can you imagine? At some point, we're going to have to do the Key to Time, and that's going to be.
Oh my god, that's going to be.
We'll have to figure out a way of doing it without, going
kill ourselves.
Going to one of those places where they kill you nicely. The Horns of Naimon in 40th. I think we're probably okay with that.
That's dog shit. Yeah.
And Underworld,
memeable,
41.
Very memeable, but it's poo. And then of course Underworld is is crap.
Awful.
I've got to say,
one of our first ever reviews on the podcast.
I've got to say though, some of these ones are crazy. Like The Deadly Assassin is my second favorite Doctor Who story, and it's only number 10. I mean, come on, what's going on there? I think The Deadly Assassin's better than The Seeds of Doom.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Seeds of Doom is fantastic, don't get me wrong. But number 6? Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so somehow.
I agree. Okay, let's rattle through some of these because we are nearing the end of our slot here on Pickaxe Week. We're into the Fifth Doctor.
They've given us the slot. We just got to keep going.
We're the last one. Nobody else is doing anything interesting here on Twitch later on.
Yeah,
you're with us.
I don't think there's any other streams going on after this. Is it probably some old crap? So come on, it's just
some shit to do with fucking. What is it? What is it you lot play these days? Bloody Minecraft. Come on, it's not 2008.
Yeah.
Christ alive. Right. The Fifth Doctor, top 3 stories. The Caves of Androzani, Earthshock, and the 5 Doctors.
I wouldn't put it in the top 3.
The 5 Doctors?
No, I wouldn't put that in the top 3.
I would have
gone for Kinder, which was 4th. Yeah. Just because, I mean, 5 Doctors is great. It's a great story. But I always feel a bit funny because it's like, well, it's not really a Peter Davison story because he doesn't really have much to do because all the other Doctors get all the grunt work.
That's true. I have to say that's one of the reasons I like it. I know, I'm not a massive Fifth Doctor
Davison's
fan.
Barely in it.
He's barely in it. All the other Doctors overshadow him massively. But I have to say, you watch it and you go, do you know what? Compared to everybody else here, you haven't got the conviction of these other actors in this role. I'm sorry. I'm putting my hands up. I am a hater. You are the wet vet. That's it.
Nobody else can eat a slice of pineapple like Richard Hurdle.
No one else eat pussy like that. Right. And then
I'm
bottom
sure his
3.
wife was very happy. If indeed he was married. I don't know.
The bottom 3. 18, The King's Demons. 19th, Warriors of the Deep. And 20th, we only reviewed it a couple of weeks ago, Matt. It's Time Flight.
Yeah. I think I would put King's Demons below Warriors of the Deep. I think I prefer Warriors of the Deep just because it's got Silurians and Sea Devils in it and the story makes more sense. The only benefit of the King's Demons is that it's only 2 episodes long, so
that is a major relief.
But it's sort of like apples and pears, isn't it? Really, you can't really. There's not much in it. But yeah, honestly, I think that's a fair old ranking. There's nothing really on this list. Oh, Black Orchid is at 13. That should be much higher. Black Orchid is much better than The Awakening. What is that about? And I would say
Frontius is better than Mordred Undead. I don't know why that's so high.
Yeah, Mordred Undead is weirdly high. Yeah,
I think, to be honest, having a lot of those stories released in box sets was probably quite useful.
Why is Planet of Fire 14? That is dog shit.
Wow. Terminus is very low as well.
Yeah. Planet of Fire does not deserve to be that high. Arc of Infinity is better than Planet of Fire.
Big time.
I mean, the only thing that Planet of Fire has got for it, there's two things.
Right, don't say it. Leave it to people's imagination. I think they know what you're talking about. Okay.
Just Google Planet of Fire and see if you can find the two things I'm talking about. Anyway.
But they are both magnificent. Right, the Sixth Doctor, top 3, Revelation of the Daleks, Vengeance on Varos, and the Two Doctors. I'm
getting told off it.
She knows it's true. Right. So yeah, Revelation of the Daleks, Vengeance on Varos, and the Two Doctors. I am very interested that the Two Doctors has been given such a help up the rankings, probably by having Patrick Troughton in it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of cool, but it's the trouble is, I mean, we've only got 8 stories to rank from if you take away the fact that Trial of a Time Lord is made up of 4 individual stories and it is a whole season. Yeah. But based on that, what do you think?
I mean, I think Revelation's in the right place. I think that probably is the best story of his era. I do like Vengeance on Varos. I don't know if I'd put Two Doctors at number 3, though. I think I'd go for something like Attack of the Cybermen.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, Two Doctors is lovely. Like you said, it's got Patrick Troughton in, which is lovely to see him back, and Fraser Hines and Sontarans and stuff. But it's one of those stories that it's a bit too long and there's not enough story to fill the 3 episode slot, because these are 3 45-minute episodes. So, you know, it's basically a 6-parter. And it feels like it. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a slog.
Bottom 3, Attack of the Cybermen, Time Lash, and the Twin Dilemma. Again, I think Attack of the Cybermen should be higher. I've never got into the Mark of the Rani. I think that the bottom 3 should be Mark of the Rani, Time Lash, and the Twin Dilemma myself.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't dislike Mark of the Rani, but again, it's not really got much of a plot. It's a bit wishy-washy. Time Lash, crap. Although I didn't mind it last time I watched it, I must say. And then Twin Dilemma. I mean, we've also talked about that. One of the very first episodes of this podcast. If you want to go back and listen to that. But like you said, not many stories to really go from, to be honest. I think that's why, it's hard.
And I think we'll talk about it in just a second when we come to the Jodie Whittaker era. Yeah. I think it's really disappointing the way that I understand it was released as under one umbrella, but I think for the benefit of Colin and the fact that one of those stories does actually stand entirely alone as an adventure, with the exception of some of the trial sequences being Terror of the Vervoids, I think it's worth including the Mysterious Planet, and because Mind Warp is up there in terms of Colin Baker stories. It is so good. Yeah. That could be top 3 because I don't really like the Two Doctors, so I'd probably put Mind Warp as my 3rd ever favourite. But because it's part of the Trial of a Time Lord, it doesn't get ranked in that way.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's going to show even more when we come to the 13th Doctor stuff, where that was a weird choice, I think. But let's move on to Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah. So top 3. Remembrance of the Daleks, The Curse of Fenric, and Survival. All good.
All very good. I don't know if I'd put Survival at number 3.
Nope.
I think I might go for something like Greatest Show in the Galaxy or Happiness Patrol, perhaps. But otherwise, I mean, I think, again, we run into this problem where there's a lot of good stories there. And it's hard to necessarily rank them. Like the obvious ones are at the top. Yeah. Remembrance and Fenric. And then, of course, at the bottom, we've got Paradise Towers at number 10. At 11, we've got Delta and the Bannerman. And then at number 12, we've got Time and the Rani. I think that's insane. I think though that order is completely cockeyed. I think Paradise Towers needs to go at the bottom.
Yeah.
Then Time of the Rani above that. And then above that, we've got Delta and the Bannerman. I like Delta and the Bannerman. It's good fun.
I think the right 3 stories are in there, but as you say, I think the order's a bit off. I think Time of the Rani is... I think we should go and do that at some point because it is a regeneration story, but it's definitely one of the weakest.
Yes.
But it's got a charm to it that I don't really get from Delta and the Bannerman, and Paradise Towers is, it's a guilty pleasure favorite of mine because I've got very fond memories of watching it as a kid. But I agree, it isn't in the pantheon of Doctor Who as a great story. No. So it probably deserves to be at the bottom of that list in particular. Yeah. I would agree. Okay, so obviously the 8th Doctor conspicuous by his absence from this list because there is only one 8th Doctor story on screen, being the TV movie. So we're going to go straight to the 9th Doctor. Top 3. The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances. That's the one with the gas mask. The Bad Wolf, Parting of the Ways in number 2. And 3rd, Dalek. I would personally put that finale first. I would maybe have Dalek 2nd and Empty Child 3rd. A great story, but I just prefer the Dalek stories in that series.
I think I would just swap 2 and 3. I think Dalek...
Yeah.
I mean, I love The Empty Child. Then again, does Dalek go top? It's again another one of these issues where it's a fairly strong season. There's only a few sort of shitty ones. I mean, the bottom 3 are Boomtown, Aliens of London, World War 3, and then The Long Game, which I think is again the right 3 to be at the bottom. I think I would put Boomtown below Aliens of London.
I agree.
I prefer Aliens of London, generally speaking. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed that something like The Unquiet Dead is as low as it is, because I love that story. I mean, Rose is great, but I think The Unquiet Dead is a better sort of... Rose is very good because obviously it introduces Doctor Who in such a good way, whereas I think The Unquiet Dead is just, generally speaking, a better all-around Doctor Who story.
Yes. I like The Unquiet Dead. Those first 3 stories, Rose, End of the World and Unquiet Dead, are actually, as we were saying earlier, a lot of people said that's a great introduction. Those 3 are a great intro to the show in terms of, intro, present day, going forward in time, going back in time. And that is a really nice formula that works for the show, is introducing those 3 stories right from the start with a new companion. Yeah. And it gets used again, that formula, later on down the line. Yeah. I like The Unquiet Dead, but it's a bit more of a runaround. So is The End of the World. Yeah. I'm generally pretty happy with that whole ranking, I have to say, of all those stories.
I don't think, looking at it, nothing's really changed compared to previous years. So
no.
And I think, it's pretty fair. Right then, over to the man himself, David Tennant.
David Tennant.
The big man,
Coming in at number 1, of course, it's Blink. It wasn't going to be anything else.
No.
And I think probably deserves its place as the best 10th Doctor story. I don't know what that says about him not being in it that much, but there you go. 2nd, Human Nature, Family of Blood. Yes, absolutely. And Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead, which is a good 2-parter. I prefer Turn Left, personally.
Yeah. Okay, right.
I like The Waters of Mars. Watching it for the podcast not long ago, I have to say, it's gone down a little bit in my estimations.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's 6th level. But then Turn Left is there, and that's so good. Midnight's so good.
We've talked about this before, about Turn Left, and I always sort of forget Turn Left exists. So I don't know what that says about me as a fan. So maybe that's one that we need to do at some point so I can reappraise it. But I mean, I'm kind of surprised that, Silence in the Library is fine, but personally I would have put Midnight above it because I think Midnight is just genius, really. in as much as that, it was like written in a weekend or whatever. And
I mean, that is amazing. Yeah.
It makes so much of the limitations of the budget and stuff. It's great.
Yeah.
And
that's something
very
Doctor Who does
unsettling.
really well is when it's got its back against the wall and it can only make a monster out of sticky back plastic and some string. It usually smashes it out of the park, because it's about a bit more than that. And Doctor Who can usually get by having a very, very shoestring budget and being able to do things on the cheap. And I think it really does come into its own when it's put into situations like that, and you get a story like Midnight, which is just one of the best bits of drama of the last, sort of 20 years on TV.
Yeah, because it's like, how can we make this scary without having, we can't afford a monster, but we need a monster. How can we, how can we do it? So it's great. And again,
having
like I said, like
a little bit. Go on.
I was going to say, like even something like Waters of Mars. I'm surprised that that's as low down. But it's interesting to see for his in particular. There are a lot of swaps and changes. Lots have gone up and down all over the place.
School Reunion. I'm baffled to see it number 10.
Yeah. I think that could have gone higher. Yeah.
I know it's got Sarah Jane and K9 in it, but I'm shocked that that's there. Utopia, The Sound of Drums, Last of the Time Lords, I think is a fantastic finale.
Yeah.
I would put it personally above The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. But Stolen Earth and Journey's End is very much, as we said with the Five Doctors, it's a bit like an Avengers get together with all the cast members from that run of the show coming back together. So I can understand why it's there.
And especially if that is your era, then that is like catnip to you. I mean, it's a bit different for us because we were, funny teenagers at that point, I guess. The significance of it was a bit wasted on me, I guess.
Smith and Jones at 16, I think that's way too high. The Christmas Invasion is a great bit of telly. Planet of the Ood, we only watched that the other week. That's fantastic. Gridlock, I think that is fantastic.
That's
The Runaway
really
Bride,
good.
I think is grand. It's probably on the same level as Smith and Jones. So I would probably just bring Smith and Jones down a little bit around The Runaway Bride, around that sort of.
I mean, look at like 42, which we reviewed not long ago. And we
so
really
low
enjoyed
down.
It. 31? Nah, come on.
31 out of 36. That's crazy. The bottom three
much higher.
Are Love and Monsters 34, The Lazarus Experiment 35, and Fear Her 36.
The Lazarus Experiment, I love. I think that's a great story. I mean, all right, it's not like one of the best, but 35? Yeah. Come on. There's some more shit ones than that in here. Planet of the Dead does not deserve to be
The Doctor's
32.
Daughter.
The Doctor's Daughter, yeah. Lazarus Experiment is much better.
That's almost a whole 10 places above The Lazarus Experiment. That's crazy. But,
it is nuts. Yeah.
And also, I mean, I think for the rest of them, it's pretty much as you'd expect. I mean, I think The Fires of Pompeii and School Reunion should have a swap.
Yeah.
I think The Fires of Pompeii should be much higher. Partners in Crime as well is fine. I'm surprised at the end of time. No, but honestly, I'd have it lower than where it is.
Yeah.
Like there's no way it should be above Gridlock. And The End of Time, what do you think as David Tennant's last story? Is it about right there or?
Don't know. Maybe. Looking at the, maybe I'd put it a bit lower. I'm not.
I haven't seen it for a long time, but I've not watched it in yonks.
Yeah.
Okay, then the 11th Doctor, top 3. Yeah. Now, this is where we get into some interesting territory because when we did our first kind of chat about ranking Doctor Who stories, it was with the 50th anniversary poll. The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special had just come out and it topped the poll. And here it is at the top of the 11th Doctor's rankings still, the Day of the Doctor.
Yeah.
What do we think of that now?
I still wouldn't put it there. I still think there are better stories. I don't know what I'd put there, but I think there's better ones. Yeah, I mean, Vincent and the Doctor's at number 2, which is great. 11th Hour's at number 3, which is also really good. I don't know. This one is a really hard one for me because I'm sure it's a difficult one for you as well because it's not an era that we are particularly fond of, and it's not one that we've particularly gone back to a lot because we're not fond of it.
But I mean, I think that the top 10 is probably about right, because I look at everything below the top 10 and again, I find very middling. The Asylum of the Daleks should not be 17th. That needs to be much lower.
Much lower, for sure. And I wouldn't put A Good Man Goes to War that high. I don't like that particularly much.
No. I mean, I'm quite happy to see some of the 7B ones have cracked out of the top half. But then let's have a look at the bottom 3.
I mean, The Snowmen should be 13.
No chance.
And then
The Bells of St. John is way better than that.
Yeah, and Let's Kill Hitler at number 30, that should be right down, because that is horse manure.
Let's talk about the horse manure that they've ranked here. 37, The Curse of the Black Spot. I'd say about right. I thought that was rubbish. 38, Nightmare in Silver, absolutely. And 39th, The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. Yes.
I think those are all fair, but I still think I'd put Let's Kill Hitler at least lower. 38. Yeah, because it's dog shit.
All right, let me just open the schedule up.
Update the spreadsheet, put that fucking crap on there.
Turn Left is in there, so we've got Turn Left coming up soon. So at least you got that before we have to worry about doing Let's Kill Hitler a bit later down the line.
Right.
Okay, let's have a look at the 12th Doctor now, because now this is interesting, because this is the first time the 12th and 13th Doctors have been ranked in DWM in this way. This is the first time we've seen a fan consensus presented in this way that isn't just a Twitter poll or somebody stating their opinion as facts on the internet. Yeah. So let's have a look.
Like us.
Like us, arseholes. So top 3.
Yeah.
Number 1, World Enough and Time, The Doctor Falls, Heaven Sent, and Mummy on the Orient Express. Good with all those.
I mean, I am, but I don't know if I'd put Mummy on the Orient Express is fine. I don't know if I'd put it that high.
I thought you really loved it.
No, I like it, but I don't know if I'd go that high. I think I'd put Flatline above it.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that. I'm very happy to see Oxygen in the top 5 because I love Oxygen.
I need to me too. I'd die without it. It's one that I need to rewatch. Sorry about that.
It was great.
This one is another difficult one because. Thank you. This is another difficult one because again, it's not an era that we're like particularly into. I would say that certain stories like the Empress of Mars. I mean, I always sing that story's praises. I think that should be higher. I also think Into the Dalek, which is beneath it. So that's 24 and 25. I don't mind Into the Dalek. I think it's fine. It's probably the better Dalek story that Peter Capaldi had. So I think that could be higher, particularly when you've got stuff like number 11, Face the Raven. Nah.
I know.
No way.
I'm also having a look at number 12 here. Listen, that needs to be higher. Yeah. There is no way that the Husbands
of River Song... You think that needs to be higher? Listen.
Husbands of River Song is above Listen. Can we at least agree that that needs to get swapped?
Husbands of River Song should be right on the fucking bottom.
And it's it's in the top 10.
But I don't think Listen shouldn't be a top 10 story.
No? Okay.
No, not at all. I don't think Face the Raven should be up there. Husbands of River Song, definitely not. And that bastard Zygon story? Nah. Feck that. That ain't the 7. No way. God, no. I mean, I don't know if the Target novelization makes up for some of the television decisions. Perhaps it does.
But it made Frank Skinner cry. Do you remember that?
He didn't say cry. How it made him cry. It made me cry as well, Frank.
Okay, let's have a look at the bottom 3. 33, Sleep No More. 34, Kill the Moon. 35, In the Forest of the Night. I would agree with all those.
Nah.
Eaters of Shite could probably be a bit lower.
Yeah, and I think...
The Return of Dr. Mysterio.
Yeah, that could be lower. The Woman Who Lived. I think I'd sooner watch Sleep No More than The Woman Who Lived.
Yeah, true.
I've rewatched Sleep No More, and in hindsight, it's not that bad. The thing that cocks that story up is that they tried to do the weird gimmick. I think had they have just done it as a plain story, it probably would have been better. I think the gimmick of it makes
found
it
footage.
The found footage, that's it. I couldn't think of what it was called. The found footage element makes it somewhat impenetrable, I think. And it confuses the story needlessly so. So I actually think that's not as bad as people think it is. But yeah, I mean, especially compared to bloody The Woman Who Lived. Any of that one, like The Woman Who Lived, The Girl Who Died is 27. I mean, that's pretty crap. Robot of Sherwood, I quite enjoy that. That's a fun little story. That should not be anywhere near as low.
No, I think people are taking liberties with that one because it is a bit lighter.
Yeah.
But it's a better story, just because it's a bit lighter and it's not dealing with, a particularly meaty subject or a particularly, evocative setup or whatever it is. But, I think those kinds of stories are definitely going to creep up the further away we get from them.
Yeah.
Robot of Sherwood will certainly pop up these rankings as we go. And then finally, the 13th Doctor, the most recent era of the program, as played by Jodie Whittaker. It was such a contentious era of the program. So many people found so many faults with it. Some of them entirely justified, others down to racism, homophobia, and other such phobias. But not all the time. So let's have a look at some of this. So number one, Power of the Doctor. No way. That's the most recent story. No way. It was the centenary special. It was Jodie's farewell, and she's barely in it. It is. I love the way you described it as it was like a child had eaten a load of sweets and been sick. Because it's not an anniversary. It's kind of like an anniversary special in the worst way that you could view an anniversary special, like bringing people back seemingly for the sake of it. There's no real coherence with the story whatsoever. No. It's just a series of things happening, and then Jodie Whittaker regenerates into David Tennant at the end. That's it. With the window dressing of having old actors come back to play parts when there's no need for them to be there, really. Yeah, that's it.
You're right. It was lovely to see Tegan and Ace come back, but they felt sort of pointless to the story. There was no real need for them to be there. You compare that to School Reunion, where Sarah Jane comes back, and it makes such a big, not only is it nostalgia and lovely to see her, but it's a massive story point for Rose because she gets to see the woman she could very well end up becoming and what life is like for her. But you don't really get that here. Yaz doesn't have that moment of like, oh, Doctor, I really love you, but you're going to leave me behind and I'm going to be doing whatever these two do.
It's missing scenes like that for it to be, and as much as I love the song, probably could have done without the Rasputin dance and had a scene with the Doctor and Yaz having that kind of a discussion. But obviously it wasn't high on the list of priorities. Number two, The Haunting of Villa Diodati.
Brilliant.
I mean, excellent, fantastic story. Probably the most atmospheric of the Jodie Whittaker stories.
Definitely,
Although there's one that's quite low on this list that I would also say is pretty good in terms of atmosphere, which would be Resolution. I really like that story.
Oh God, no.
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 You're shaking your head. No. I love that story.
As soon as you get into the cafe with Ryan and his dad, Dad.
What
have you been doing? Have you been on the oil rigs? No, son. I've been selling microwaves, and I'm going to use it to try and blow up a Dalek later on. God Almighty! It's like, this is boring bullshit. I don't care.
Oh shit! I
don't care about Ryan. Up. He is a non-entity of a companion. He is a vacuous void of a companion.
That might be true, but the Dalek stuff in it is fucking great.
I mean, I don't mind the Dalek stuff. I gotta say, I quite like the mutant thing and like the attaching it to the girl and all that stuff. So I mean, the design of the final Dalek, I've aired my criticisms about that, and I know, plot wise it makes sense, but it still looks like shit.
Yeah, I was looking at photos of the Daleks. Good toy.
It's a great toy.
I was looking at them as they eventually appear in Revolution, that design. Yeah. We see it in its full glory. Yeah. And I was looking at it and I thought, I admire them for doing it. I really do. And to have another design of Dalek when you've got the bronze one sitting there and they are really the peak of that kind of a design.
This is it.
To go, do you know what? Let's do something different. And they do something different. It doesn't look as good, but it's a worthy addition, I think. Just to have something different. I think they look grand, you know?
Okay.
Okay, and then third, Fugitive of the Jadoon, again.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I think that's very good. Now, it had Flux, which was obviously the 6-part story made up of other stories. Had that not have been treated in this poll the way that it has as one story, which I think is a bit wrong, because I don't think it is the same as like Trial of a Time Lord.
It isn't.
You know, I would have put Village of the Angels up there.
Yeah.
That probably would have been my number 2, and then Fugitive of the Jadoon would have been 3. But unfortunately, the poll didn't work this way, which is a bit bonkers.
It's mad. I think that's terrible, because Flux is a subtitle. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you didn't get, you know, I can understand why they might have done it with Trial of a Time Lord, because it's Trial of a Time Lord part 1 to 14 in the credits. That's how it's presented. Yeah. But it's not done as Flux episode 1, Flux episode 2. They're split into chapters, but they've all got their own individual. So if you want to, maybe you have to include the chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2 in the listing. But I'd love to hear their reasoning for that. Because it is not the same thing as Trial of a Time Lord.
No, because Flux feels more like a story arc in the same way as Bad Wolf or something like that. Perhaps slightly more on the nose. But yeah, I don't think it requires, I think you could easily watch Village of the Angels and sort of ignore the fluxy stuff around it. I don't know. It's a weird
stories like War of the Sontarans. That was great.
Yeah, that was really good. That would be up there for me. I'd have that as like number 4 or something. I really enjoyed that.
And then the bottom 3. Let's have a look at the bottom 3 for this. So Legend of the Sea Devils 22. I'd agree with that. 23, The Battle of Ranskor av Kolos. And also Orphan 55.
Yeah.
Excuse me, right at the bottom in 24th. And I would agree with all those.
Do you think I maybe might put Orphan 55 slightly above Ranskor av Kolos? I think he's got more of a story. Ranskor av Kolos just feels like
it does.
Nothing's really going on here. And as a season finale, I think it fails hugely.
I do wonder at some point if we'll find out that Resolution, like maybe the airing of it all was supposed to be a lot closer together, and that it was, maybe. You know, Resolution is definitely marketed as a New Year's Day special. Yeah. But I wonder if the show was supposed to maybe roll into it straight into that story, because there was a bit too much of a break for it to be seen as directly, you know, related to that season. It felt like a separate special, didn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it did. And I think, had that have been the season finale, it would have worked a lot better. But that also, just thinking about that story, it goes back to that point that you made earlier about what Chibnall was saying in that podcast. You know, this is one of those instances where the ball was sort of dropped because they kept the Dalek a secret, and they, you know, put literally extras that were in the story for all of about 10 seconds, less than that.
On the front cover.
On the front cover, on the poster. And it was like, but everyone knew that there was a Dalek in it. And you're like, well, why don't you lead with the fact that this is your new Doctor meeting her greatest enemy for the first time? You know, people might have came in and actually watched it if they knew that the Daleks were going to turn up.
That would have been Radio Time's front cover.
Exactly, and
people would have watched it, you know? More people would have watched it. And there's nothing wrong with your audience knowing, like, come on, the Daleks are in it every year.
Yeah.
Like, and now finally it's the first female Doctor in her first ever Dalek story. And nobody knows. Now, I'm glad that, I know you don't like Revolution of the Daleks so much. I'm glad that Eve of the Daleks is in the top 10. I would personally
I like Revolution.
have it.
I like Revolution.
You like Revolution? Okay.
Revolution's, I enjoy that. Yeah.
I would personally put Eve above Spyfall.
Yes.
And I would also say, although I like The Woman Who Fell to Earth, I think Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror is good fun.
Yeah, I prefer that as a story.
And The Witchfinders is also good fun.
Witchfinders I'd put up there because I really enjoy that. The end's a bit iffy, but the actual everything else is quite good. That was sort of a breath of fresh air during that season.
That one climber that I can see, as we go through into the future and have further polls, I can say I think the Ghost Monument is going to be coming a lot higher in these polls.
Do you think?
Yeah, because I think as a standalone, I think it's a really nice story. I know it doesn't have a lot of plot to it, but it's basically, they just have to find the TARDIS at the end, and that's it. And I think for a story that kind of impresses the importance of the TARDIS and its kind of central part in, as a piece in the show, there aren't many stories that place the TARDIS with that level of importance in the story.
No, I guess not.
When we have something like Journey to the Center of the TARDIS, it kind of is selling itself on that concept and doesn't really do quite enough to make it to justify its title,
Right.
But the Ghost Monument, I think, is a better story about the TARDIS than that.
Yeah.
Even for that payoff at the end with the lovely sweeping shots of the TARDIS on the hill and
stunning.
All that stuff, and the music swells. It's just fantastic. That whole sequence is brilliant. Okay, then. Well, there we go. Interesting. We've probably certainly gone over our allotted time here, but we've had a lot of fun talking about Doctor Who and trying to introduce you all to the mad concepts involved in watching this program. If you've enjoyed listening to us rabbit on, we are available in all the regular podcasting places every fortnight, talking about Doctor Who, old, new, and what's to come. And we also have a Patreon account. If you pledge to that, then you get the show every week, but we'll take a slight diversion and talk about some of the minutiae of Doctor Who, for example, Doctor Who audio dramas, Doctor Who spin-offs. We do Q&As and stuff over there as well. It's a good time, so make sure you go and check that out.
Yeah, and just to say thank you everyone for watching. Thank you to Pickaxe for organising Pickaxe Week and having us on here. Tomorrow at 5:00 it's One Life Left, and then from 6:30 it's Pitch Please. So definitely come back tomorrow and check those guys out. But for now, we'll sign off and see you hopefully on our usual spots on the internet. And hopefully this has been informative and you are now all card-carrying sad Doctor Who fans like us. Yeah. So we'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Help me. It's okay, Joe. I'm dying.